Hello everyone, and welcome to your third lesson for World War I. Today we're going to look at the long-term causes of World War I. These are causes that occurred over numerous years that eventually led to there being a possibility of a world war. The long-term causes of World War I begins with 4 words. It is important to understand these 4 words. They are often referred to as the main causes of World War I. M.A.I.N is an acronym to help you remember the words when you study for tests or exams. The main causes of World War I are the words militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. Militarism has to do with having a strong army. It is when a country focuses on the importance of their military power. Alliances, which is a word you've already seen, is a formal agreement between 2 or more states or countries for mutual support in case of war. So if someone attacks someone that is part of my alliance, I will protect them. And if I am attacked, that country will protect me. Imperialism is the policy of extending a nation's authority. This would be colonization, when countries went out and they gathered territories and then they decided to rule them. Pretty much what happened to South Africa when Great Britain came to South Africa. Nationalism is a deep sense of patriotism. Now, patriotism means to have pride in your country. So nationalists hold their country in high regard. Nationalism would mean that the soldiers would go to war just for their country because they were proud of their country and they wanted to fight for their country and they would die for your country. Let's unpack each of these words in the context of leading up to World War I. Militarism. The late 19th century was an era of military competition. Everybody wanted to have the best army, particularly between the major European powers. The policy of building a stronger military was judged relative to neighbors, so you would compare yourself to the country next to you. This made other countries a little bit more paranoid, and so they started creating different alliances and treaties with each other to try and protect each other from those with large armies. It was fed by the cultural belief that war is good for nations. Germany in particular looked to expand its navy. However, the naval race was never a real contest. The British always maintained naval superiority, meaning that Britain always had the strongest and the best navy. Alliances. As you know, a web of alliances developed in Europe between 1870 and 1914. In fact, there were even some alliances before 1870 that occurred. This created 2 camps, our 2 teams, the Triple Entente and the Triple Alliance. We know that the Triple Alliance was Germany, Austria-Hungary and Italy, and it was formed in 1882. And we know that the Triple Entente was France, Britain and Russia, and that was formed in 1907. A historic point of conflict, meaning a time in history where there was quite a bit of fighting between Austria-Hungary and Russia, was over the Balkan interests, all those Balkan countries that we have spoken about in the past. And France had a deep suspicion of Germany because of their defeat in their little war from 1870 to 1871, where they lost Alsace-Lorraine to Germany. Imperialism, the expanding of one's empire, that we mainly know as colonization. This also pushed countries towards adopting alliances. No one wanted one country to have too much power, and when you started to see, especially Britain and Germany, how they were both in competition for power, this forced alliances with smaller countries or less powerful countries. This would also bring in countries that normally wouldn't want conflict. They normally wouldn't want to get involved in politics, but to protect themselves, they formed alliances with the different main countries. It has been suggested that Germany was motivated by imperial ambitions to invade Belgium and France, meaning Germany wanted to take over Belgium and France. Certainly the expansion of the British and French empires, fired by the rise of industrialism and the pursuit of new markets, caused some resentment in Germany. So Germany was a little bit jealous of Britain's power, of Britain's navy, and of Britain's colonies. And the French Empire was also growing. Both countries had had their little industrial revolutions, and Germany was starting to catch up. And Germany was quite an aggressive country at this stage, and they decided that they also wanted their own colonies. They also wanted to expand and be powerful. Then we look at nationalism, which is pride in your country. Nationalism was also a new and powerful source of tension in Europe. It was tied to militarism, because think about it. If you had a large army, an effective army, that had incredible pride in their country, then they would be prepared to go to war for their country. This started to create a little bit of competition amongst the main countries regarding who would have the strongest and the proudest armies.
Militarism. There was intense rivalry between the bigger European countries over the strength of their armies and navies. The German Kaiser was determined to see his country great.
His speeches resounded with megalomania. He told new recruits to the army,
"Children of my guard, you are now my soldiers. You have given yourselves over to me, body and soul. There is only one enemy for you, and that is my enemy."
The German Kaiser was trying to match the armies of France and Russia, and at the same time build a battle fleet that would rival Britain's. In the 20 years up to 1914, the German Navy was transformed to become the second largest in the world.
In Britain, alarm grew with the growth of the German fleet just across the water. Public opinion, disunited on almost everything else, was united on the need for battleships. Each launching, whether in Barrow or in Bremen, drove Britain and Germany further and further apart. Even men as sympathetic towards Germany as Lord Haldane could say,
"Peace was to be preserved, but preserved on what terms? On the terms that the German was so strong by land and sea that he could swagger down the high street of the world, making his will prevail at every turn?"
In 1908, Lloyd George met the German ambassador.
I explained to him that the real ground for the growing antagonism in this country towards Germany was not jealousy of her rapidly expanding commerce, but fear of her growing navy.
But the Kaiser did not care.
"I do not wish for a good understanding with England at the expense of the extension of the German fleet."
So, Germany's naval dreams made Britain a potential enemy, just as her military might had kept alive the hostility of France. The two nations were drawn together by Germany's challenge. The Entente Cordiale was forged.
Alliances. Two powerful groups of countries faced each other. The Triple Alliance of Germany, Austria, and Italy caused France, Russia, and Britain to draw closer. Imperialism. The big powers were competing for empires. Germany especially was jealous of Britain's huge empire, which centred on India and covered a quarter of the world. In Africa, France, Germany, Belgium and Italy, as well as Britain, were busy carving up territory, building railroads and plantations, competing for land and wealth. The fourth main cause was nationalism. Large nations were proud of their position, and the small nations, which were ruled by others, wanted their freedom. This hunger for freedom was strongest in the Slav lands, in the Balkans, where Austria ruled many Serbs.
So firstly, the main causes leading up to World War I were militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. But this was just the start. There were other causes combined with the main causes. This was the rise of Germany, the new Kaiser, remember Kaiser is the word for king, so the new king of Germany and their desire for world power, the arms race, and the two main alliances that were formed. So these four things in combination with the main causes actually resulted in World War I. The rise of Germany. Until the middle of the 19th century, Germany was divided into many separate states, so it actually wasn't the country that we know of today. The most important of these German states was a kingdom called Prussia. In the 1860s, the leaders of Prussia wanted to unite Germany. We know already that France was unhappy about this and went to war against Prussia from 1870 to 1871. France was beaten, and the victorious Prussian government was able to set up a new German empire. This was a massive new state that included most German-speaking people. Wilhelm I, who was the King of Prussia, was declared the Emperor or the Kaiser of Germany. His chief minister, Bismarck, became the powerful Chancellor of Germany. Between 1871 and 1914, the economy of the new German state went from strength to strength. This was based on an amazing industrial revolution, and by 1914, the output of the German factories had overtaken the output of the British factories. Chancellor Bismarck was very skillful. After 1871, he stopped the German government from getting involved in any more wars. France was the sworn enemy of Germany, but Bismarck made sure that France remained isolated. As long as he was in charge of German foreign policy, there was no danger of Germany going to war against Russia or Britain. This all changed when Germany got a new Kaiser, Wilhelm II, and Bismarck lost his chancellorship. So this new Kaiser becomes cause number 2. Now that Germany was the equal of Britain in terms of wealth and industry, some German people felt that their country should have a worldwide empire like Britain. One German who believed this was the new ruler of Germany, Kaiser Wilhelm II, who came to power in 1888. He made Bismarck retire in 1890. Wilhelm wanted a new, more aggressive approach to the rest of the world. He ended the friendly relationship that Bismarck had encouraged between Germany and Russia, and as a result of his attitude, other countries began to see Germany as a threat. The third long-term cause was the arms race. Now, an arms race is a military race, like military competition between the countries. After 1897, the German government started building up an enormous navy that could challenge the might of the British Navy. The Germans knew that a worldwide empire would have to be defended by a worldwide navy. The German government passed a law in 1900 ordering the building of a huge new fleet of 41 battleships and 60 cruisers. So the British responded energetically to this threat by increasing the size of their navy. They introduced a new type of powerful battleship called a dreadnought in 1906. Not to be beaten, the Germans responded by building similar ships of their own. And so the British went on to order even more substantial battleships called super dreadnoughts. Other countries also took part in this arms race, but in a different way. The French increased their forces and by 1914 had an army of nearly 4 million soldiers. The Russians spent a fortune on military railways that were clearly designed to take troops to fight Germany and Austria-Hungary. Russian spending on this army was huge. People in Germany feared that this mighty force would one day flatten Berlin, which was the capital of Germany. The fourth cause was actually the two main alliances. Germany signed a treaty of alliance with Austria-Hungary in 1879. The two states remained allies in the decades that followed. At first, the only likely enemy of this alliance was France. However, Willem's clumsy policy encouraged Russia to join forces with France. In 1892, France and Russia agreed to an alliance. If either country was attacked by Germany, the other state would go to war against the Germans. This was actually quite clever if you look at the map, because Germany is between France and Russia, so they would get attacked from both sides. The government of Britain began to look around for allies at the turn of the century. British politicians thought about an alliance with Germany against France and Russia. However, German policy under the Kaiser was so badly managed that Britain felt forced to look to France and Russia, so rather make them an ally. Britain established friendly relations with France in 1904 and with Russia in 1907. The link was not an official alliance, but an entente, an understanding, a friendly agreement that they would work together. People talked of the Triple Entente as an anti-German grouping of France, Russia, and Britain. Taking the main causes into consideration and thinking about those two big alliances, how could a general war even happen?